My top 10 favorite black metal albums released in the year 2015 or later, because loath as I am to admit, 2015 is 10 years ago now, so, to answer the question, what has black metal done in the past 10 years? Let's find out. Number 10, Abigor, Totschlager, a Saint Slayer songbook from 2021. So for those of you who don't know, Abigor hails from Austria, and I actually first heard of this band when I saw them playing live on a funky site.
What's up? I'm Bruno. I live in Austria's coolest city, Vienna. Funky site is over influential.
Nah, but for real, Abigor, classic black metal band, and I wanted to dive deeper into their newer stuff, and I just saw this album artwork, and I'm like, this looks like something out of a Elden Ring or Dark Souls cutscene, and I just absolutely love those games. And one thing I want to say is strength builds only, baby, alright? Magic and dexterity are for nerds.
No dex allowed.
But straight away, you have Gamora Rising, which has these very, very captivating piano notes, and I'll be honest, normally I kind of hate intros like this, where it's like pseudo-classical stuff right before, black metal or whatever. I'm kind of like, just skip the intro, just get right into the meat of the song, but this intro is amazing, and it just perfectly tees up Nightside Rebellion. Another song with a pseudo-classical intro that just perfectly tees up the rest of the song is Orkblut Sieg oder Tod. And that song is kind of just like a prime example of what make Abigor geniuses, because they're able to make such complex and at times cacophonous music, but they're able to just make it musical, make it work. I think the chorus of this song is just an absolute earworm. You got other bangers on this album like The Saint of Murder, Scarlet Suite for the Devil, Tartaros Tides, and Flood of Wrath. And quite frankly, if you haven't at least listened to one Abigor album by now, then you got some growing up to do, kid. Come on. Number 9, Spectral Wound, Infernal Decadence from Canada, 2018. Now, normally this album would be higher on the list, but given the fact that the United States recently imposed 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, had to drop these guys down to 9. Sorry about that, fellas. But I would have thought these guys were Finnish based off their sound. I think there's very clear Sargeist and Behexen influence, and, that's right up my alley. But what I really like about these guys is just how they dial up the intensity, because I am just so sick of all these friggin' pusswad Wackgaze bands on Bandcamp. For me, it is so refreshing to hear a band that has a very unabashedly old school and direct approach and is more than willing to kick some fucking ass. My favorite tracks from this album are Woods from Which the Spirits Once So Loudly Howled and Feral Gates of Flesh. But you also got some other tracks on this album, like the 5th track, La Nuit Freud de l'Oubli, which I'll be honest, didn't listen to that song at all because the title's in French and I don't have time for games. And I also like the closer, Imperial Thanatosis. I could understand some people maybe thinking it's a little bit boring, goes on a little too long, but I think it brings kind of a cool atmosphere with like the tremolo pick guitar lines. Thought that was neat. Number 8. Has it dawned on you yet that Marduk's Memento Mori from 2023 is better than Marduk's Frontschwein from 2015? Frontschwein has some great songs on it, but it also has some odd ones too. I feel like Memento Mori is pretty similar to that album, but it's a bit leaner. It doesn't have the baggage of some of the odd songs on Frontschwein, like Doomsday Elite, for example. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of Frontschwein. I remember being really impressed when they came out with this. I was like, wow, 25 years into your career, and you make something this inspired, this good. But turns out 8 years later, Marduk would be like, nah, fuck that shit sucks! Straight from the jump, Marduk will shit in your pants with the freaking eponymous opener, going into Heart of the Funeral, going into Blood of the Funeral, and then going into Cholesterol of the Funeral. Alright, so I made that last one up. But you are going to have 3 dirty diapers worth of dookie defecate in your pants until you finally get to the first non-Blast Fest song of the album, Shovel Beat Scepter, which is when the band finally gives you the courtesy and the reprieve to finally wipe. Other good tracks on this album include Marching Bones and Red Tree of Blood, which has these really cool, menacing, like, bass synths or whatever. But my favorite song on the album is probably Heart of the Funeral. Slevin Mortis is just like, the funeral! Number 7. From Finland, you got Malum, Night of the Luciferian Light from 2017. Fun fact about this album, just based solely off the cover art, which looks very old school to me. For the longest time, I thought this album came out like in 1992 or something like that. It was only more recently than I'd like to admit that I found it only came out 8 years ago. And if you know me, then you know that I'm a huge sucker for Finnish black metal. But look, it's not my fault, okay? They just make the best black metal per capita in the world. What do you want me to do about it? I would describe Malum's sound as being like a mix of early Baptism and early Migwa. They're kind of like early Baptism in the sense that a lot of their songs have these ethereal and kind of mystical sounding riffs, and kind of like Migwa in the sense that a lot of these riffs tend to be very repetitive, very simple, but also very effective. One thing that I will concede about this album is that it's definitely not, like, the most original or most groundbreaking stuff ever. But, you know, I'm not really one of those people that's like, oh, you know, anything new that comes out has to be completely different than what was done before. I don't think there's really anything wrong with, like, treading a familiar path. Because, you know, honestly, and this will sound kind of corny, but I think if you really just put your heart and soul into the music, that'll permeate through the songs, and you can pick up on it as a listener. And when it comes to Malum's tunes, I feel it, man. But yeah, some of my other favorite tracks on the album are Perdition, Kaista Kiros Ya Kuolema, and the closer title track, Night of the Luciferian Light. Number 6, Sargeist, Unbound from 2018, also in Finland. Radon666 do a black metal video without talking about Sargeist Challenge. Impossible! Look, once again, it is not my fault that Sargeist is such a high quality and consistent band. Alright, you can't see it, but off camera, Shoutrag's got a 12 gauge pointed right at my head, and he's saying, oh, Radon, you know I dropped a banger with the latest Horna. One of these days I'm gonna drop another banger with Sargeist, and you're gonna have to talk about it. I'm like, alright, I'm sorry, okay, whatever you say, Shoutrag, whatever you say. But this is the band's first, and I think probably only album with vocalist Profundus, because I think he has since left the band. For the longest time, Sargeist, of course, had Behexen vocalist Hoth Torog. But even with the new guy Profundus, Sargeist don't even flinch. I like the change in production that Sargeist did for this album, as opposed to what they did on the previous album, Feeding the Crawling Shadows, which sounds like they recorded it on an iPhone in GarageBand and then just turned the reverb up to 300%. You know, Unbound, I mean, the production isn't anything crazy, but it's just kind of just like your regular, you know, raw black metal production. But this album is super consistent throughout. It starts off with Psychosis Incarnate and To Wander the Night's Eternal Path, rather. Then in the middle of the album, you have Hunting Eyes and Psychosis Incarnate, which are probably the best songs on the album. And then to close it out, you have Wake of the Compassionate and Grail of the Pilgrim. And if you're somewhat like myself and you can't get enough of the Unbound album, they have an EP they released a year after called Death Veneration. It's just 4 tracks, kind of leftover stuff from the Unbound album, so, you know, if you want a second helping, there you go. Number 5, closing out a string of Finnish bands here. Hapakruunu, Unios Xiaomin Soda from everyone's favorite year, 2020. Have a Crunu have an awesome and unique sound. I've kind of said before that they sound almost like a black metal with heavy metal influences, although it's not like this is black and heavy metal. You know, there's still tremolo picking, there's still blast beats and stuff, but I hear it almost like implicitly in the music. I also would say that Have a Crunu songs kind of have like an epic quality to them, kind of similar to Bathory's Viking metal style. You know, they have the acoustic guitars, they have like the chanting type vocals, and I suppose that is why people call Have a Crunu pagan black metal, because they don't really have the usual either evilness or kind of icy frigidness of other black metal bands, but I think that's part of what makes them unique. Some of my favorite songs on this album are Ja V Mine on Yo, Kunis Varjo Sa, and the title track, which I think is probably my favorite black metal song of the 2020 so far. Number 4, Ninkersarg, something like that. Dread March of Solemn Gods from 2022. Most albums that I listen to, I feel like I need some time to kind of digest them to really fully appreciate them. But this was one of those albums where immediately from the jump, I was like, alright, these guys are the shit. These guys rule. Melodic black metal mastery from the UK, in it, bruv. And honestly, I bet if you handed this album to a metalhead that doesn't, particularly like black metal, I think these songs are just so catchy and melodic that they'd still probably like a couple of songs off this album. I would say their sound is like a mix between Immortal and Dissection. You know, it's got that frigid iciness that you come to expect from Immortal, and it just has the melodic instincts of classic Dissection. Not Renkaios Dissection, don't worry, classic Dissection. As far as my favorite tracks, I mean, I'd say basically the whole album, but if you wanted me to pick a couple songs, I'd probably say the first 2 real songs, the title track and Under the Dead of Night. Number 3, from Iceland, Misthyrming Algliami 2019. I have a tough time articulating Misthyrming's sound because kind of like Have a Crunu, they don't really fit the typical mold of what you'd expect from black metal in the sense that, they don't really sound super evil or sound really like Darkthrone that much. The riffs and the guitar melodies especially are just unlike anything I've ever really heard in black metal before. And Misthyrming are able to just masterfully layer these rhythms with the guitar melodies and occasionally like some backing keyboards just to have this absolutely massive sound. And this massiveness just gives way to some absolutely awesome and memorable moments. But yeah, instead of trying to kind of describe their sound in vain, I'll just tell you what songs you should check out. You should do Orgia, Alsela, and Alglumi, the title track. Should also check out the other songs, but I've never seen some of these characters in my life, and if it ain't the Roman alphabet, then I'm out. I'm done. Number 2, Asagram, Potestas Magicum Diaboli from 2017, and this band comes from the Netherlands. Asagram is my favorite modern black metal band, and they have been kicking ass ever since they released this album, their debut in 2017, and they just haven't stopped since. Frontwoman and composer Obscura is a master of creating just this very evil, ritualistic atmosphere, and that's kind of why I get annoyed when some people say that Asagram just does the second wave thing. Like, yes, obviously the influence is clear, and that's a big reason why I like them, but Obscura puts so much into these songs with the dissonant and distorted overdubs. You have spooky, clean guitars, and her hellish vocals over top that are just super immersive. I would love nothing more than to just get a proper, surround sound system, turn off all the lights, take a tab of acid, and just put myself into a psychosis-induced nightmare while listening to this music.
Nightmare, 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 nightmare.
Despite all this sonic blasphemy, though, Osagram still retains their musicality. And at times, I think even some of these riffs and songs get very emotive. See Gospel of Ignition. Maybe you don't hear it, but for me, I hear, yearning in that riff. And even if you don't hear the yearning in that riff, I think we can both agree that that is a riff that you can bob your head to. My other favorite tracks on the album are Transformation, Leviathan, and Carried by Lucifer's Wings. And Obscura, if you're watching this, just want to know, you single? Just asking, because, I have an excellent credit score and a very stable job. I'm very submissive and docile. I'll come over, visit you in the Netherlands, just please. I'm so desperate. All right, so some honorable mentions before we get to number 1. Dark Funeral, Where Shadows Forever Reign, I think 2016 or 2017. I remember when this album came out, I was an edgy little bastard in high school, and I was just getting into black metal, so when I saw this album had a song called Nail Them to the Cross, I was all over it like Botox on Dolly Parton's unexpressive face. Horna, Nyx, Hymna, Yale. I don't know, this album came out literally 6 months ago. I don't think I can really justify giving it a spot on the list, but I think the honorable mentions will do. This is my favorite Horna album since 2008's Sano Yesi Arella or whatever. And finally, I'll take Lord Belial, Legion from 2022. Lord Belial's comeback album after not releasing anything in 13 years, and they just casually dropped this masterpiece, no rustiness, no nothing, just whatever, here you go, picking up right where they left off. And at number 1, Migwa, Exercises in Futility, coming out in 2015 from Poland. I'll cut to the chase. I think the reason that I love this album so much is that for me it perfectly executes on the feelings of yearning and perseverance that I feel like I can only get from black metal music. And my understanding is that, Migwa is trying to go for a very bleak and nihilistic atmosphere in this album, which I think they absolutely nail. But when I listen to the music and M's vocals, I hear the will to persevere through all the shit, Like, you may not be happy about your current circumstance, things are not necessarily going all hunky-dory. Even if the chances of it getting better in the future are very small, you're still doing everything that you can to still give yourself a chance of success. And I think that feeling, that sentiment is something that we can all relate to at least a little bit.
The other of sanctity is just refined stage of existence.
This album is just full of moments that give me chills. Exercises 1, Exercises 4, Exercises 5. Just take your pick of the bunch. This album is drummer Darkside's magnum opus. I think the song Exercises 5 will likely be a rite of passage for future black metal drummers to come. I think he has more than a dozen other moments that are maybe less flashy, but still kind of equally creative. The ride patterns on Exercises 2, the cymbal embellishments on Exercises 1 and Exercises 6. I think in some ways, Mig was almost kind of like Tool in the sense that both guitar players write very, very simple, repetitive riffs, and then the drummers are just going full Dr. Octopus behind the kit just to kind of help keep everything interesting. But yeah, overall, this album rules. So that is my list. You can give me yours down below. And just so you know, I am only accepting criticism from the employed among us, all right? If you did not generate a W-2 in 2024, then I ain't hearing shit from you, all right? You got to get your money up, dog.